Hi, I'm Daniela Cambone for StansberryInvestor.com. And my guest today says that when we're on the topic of inflation, it's important to remember that it's neither necessary nor natural. Please welcome to the show, Jeff Booth. He is a best-selling author, and he joins me now from Vancouver, Canada. Jeff, good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Daniela.
Yeah, and just for folks new to you, you were the founder of Build Direct, a company you started in your home, and you built it up to surpass a $500 million market cap. But you're perhaps best known for your book that took the macro world by storm. It was a top recommendation of 2020, The Price of Tomorrow, a book you say you wrote for your kids. Why?
There was a missing piece that everybody was talking about, inflation or deflation, or there was a missing piece in the whole puzzle, that technology was moving faster than essentially anybody could do anything about. Technology reduces prices. It's simply, it makes things more efficient. We use technology ourselves to make things more efficient, to save our times, and so do CEOs as businesses. And a whole new world is being reimagined across a digital landscape. And so it makes sense that if technology makes things that efficient, the prices should be falling at that rate. And that's deflation. We should be getting more for less, and our time should be saved as a result. But that's bumping into a system that we've lived in all our lives, which requires inflation to hold it together. Because if you allow deflation to happen against a credit-based system with as much debt as we have, the entire system unwinds to the ground. And so those are the facts. And I realized, as I was, and why I got curious about it, and I've been curious about it for 10 years, is I could not understand why we were not seeing prices falling at the rate they should be in the overall market if technology is moving into every industry. And on investigation of that hypothesis, I found, there was, before I wrote the book, there was there's about $250 trillion of debt in the world to run an $80 trillion economy. But the big aha smoking gun was $185 trillion of that debt came in the last 20 years. That was before COVID. And so, and that $185 trillion produced $46 trillion of global GDP. So what you saw is exactly as my thesis predicted. As deflation was taking hold in the market, or disinflation, you had to offset that with lower interest rates and more debt to try to stop it. And that path we're on destroys the world. And so if you ask why for my kids, they grow up, you grow up, everybody grows up in a very different world under this scenario of fighting these polar opposite forces.
And Jeff, on one of your recent tweets, you say, we are told we need inflation. Something you say is one of the greatest lies we're fed. It only seems true because the rules of the game were designed that way.
And in a credit-based system where more and more debt is kind of put into a system, if you have deflation, the debt gets more expensive and can't be paid back. So I understand the trap that the Fed is in, and actually globally we are in, because that system requires inflation to continue. It requires more debt, it requires more leverage, because if you allow the natural forces of an economy to happen, a free market with technology, it is deflationary, period. No questions about it. I'll take that debate on anybody. So you're trapped in this system. And what is inflation? Like, really? It's theft. It's a hidden tax so that government can get bigger. And if you just moved the hidden theft to above the line, and they had to be honest about what it is, government would have to get smaller, and we would have to live within our means. But it almost doesn't matter on that equation, so we've been led to believe that inflation is good for us. It is good for some people. It is good if you have assets and everything else and you own more wealth. It is actually, it's good for you. Those assets will go up. It's good for debt. but it is not to say inflation, to say it's really good if your money loses value over time. It's just it's an arbitrary, like it's not necessary. It's because we built a system on it.
Right. So when you're coming out of a crisis like the pandemic and the Fed is basically saying, you need the juice in the system of inflation to come out of uh, something as monstrous as the pandemic, what's your response to that?
Well, again, they're kicking the can down the road, making the problem worse and worse and worse for society. Take every issue: wealth inequality, climate change. All of these issues are actually a derivative, a second order derivative of inflation, a system that must grow forever and steal from people and pass that theft to other people as a result. So you have corruption at the base layer of money. And if you have corruption at the base layer of money, then it's pretty obvious you would have corruption everywhere in society.
And Jeff, I guess, how does this tie into your other topic that you're very passionate about is Bitcoin? How can Bitcoin solve this problem?
Well, so I remember I've been thinking about this for a long time, and one of the reasons I wrote the book is I was hopeful that there would be um, an intelligent first principles debate on how we transition between systems. That is the truth. I would look for everything. I know you've done a lot on gold. You've done, and that was historically a way to essentially keep governments in check and run a free market. And I went down every path I could possibly get to, and I realized the system can't change itself. But what would you do if you were sitting on top of a system that required inflation, and the facts changed, and it was going to be a different system going forward? If you signaled that you were going to abandon that system, the entire system, everything, banks, everything would collapse to the ground. And so they're kind of trapped right now and they're stuck. And what I realized is the system cannot change itself. We could blame its bad actors and everything else, and there's probably some bad actors in the system, but it's more of a system problem. And the system needed, just like any system change, it's imposed from the outside in. And so today, if you buy my thesis about technology being deflationary, then the only way for the abundance from technology to be broadly shared in a free market is through a currency that is native to the digital realm we're moving into, that cannot be manipulated. And the only thing I've found is Bitcoin. Every other currency, every other cryptocurrency is the type proof of stake and everything else can be manipulated. That's the point.
And that is an argument that that we continuously hear, is that Bitcoin can't be manipulated. So as an investor, I mean, are you all in on Bitcoin?
Well, to say, so I massively respect Michael Saylor and some of the stuff he's done. He's incredible for that community, and he is speaking the truth. He is doing a speculative attack using essentially printed money to I think make the best asymmetric bet that the world's ever seen in Bitcoin. So would I go all in 100% on Bitcoin? No, I probably wouldn't. Would I put a lot of my wealth into Bitcoin? But would I put a lot of my wealth into Bitcoin? Yes, I would. But I'm not doing it for money. I'm doing it for a way bigger reason, and because I'm one of the beneficiaries of a system of inflation. Very wealthy, had a ton, many successful businesses. Still, I'm chairman of 7 different companies today, and I benefit out of a system that looks like that. But the world will burn if that system continues, and it will not look the same. So I'm in it for a way deeper reason than than Bitcoin making money. It will make a lot of money. I suspect it'll make a lot, because it is the best asymmetric bet of all time. But I'm in it for a bigger reason.
Okay. So what would, and I hear what you're saying, but what would be needed for you to take that step to be 100% in Bitcoin? Is there something that's missing, or you just would
I would
rather be
never, I'd
90%?
never, I wouldn't, I'd never go to 100% into anything.
Okay, got it.
And that's the thing, because what if I'm wrong, or what if something else changes,
Right.
right? And so I'm not arrogant enough to say, so what would be an edge case about
Right.
around Bitcoin that narrative might change? I'm constantly checking if that is correct. I think the only edge case possible that narrative doesn't isn't correct is at some point quantum breaking that before Bitcoin changes it. But that being said, that's the reason. I just wouldn't want to I just wouldn't want to leave my family with nothing because I went all in on
Fair
an
enough.
edge
No,
case.
I respect that. Jeff, I'd like you to speak to these two counter arguments that have been coming up a lot in regards to Bitcoin now. Is the environmental damage, A, and two, how private it is indeed, and can your Bitcoin be taken from you?
So again, right now, let's look through a different lens of this conversation first, and then we'll get there. Imagine you were a central government or multiple central governments, and you were losing the plot on currency, and that currency gave you an ability to expand government powers, and you were losing the plot. What might you say to stop that? And so a lot of the people in the system that are talking about the negativity of Bitcoin and everything else are actually completely misinformed. Number one, I've asked this question many times. I've asked it to Bill Gates, I've asked it to Al Gore, I've asked it to everybody. I have still not seen an answer. How is climate change or environmentalism congruent with inflation? Inflation is climate change. Inflation equals climate change because you cannot grow forever on a finite planet and manipulate money to do so. What would oil prices be today without manipulation of money? What would your house prices be without manipulation of money? So that manipulation of money is forcing us all in a mouse wheel to work harder and harder. We're slaves to it. We work harder and harder for prices that are constantly going up and ruining the environment. So I find it distasteful, a soft word, when people talk about Bitcoin being bad for the environment, when Bitcoin actually saves the planet. And so yes, a lot of people are talking about Bitcoin helping transition to an clean energy world, but that's a second layer thing. The first primary thing is an inflationary monetary policy is climate change. It's impossible to fix climate through an inflationary monetary policy. And think about it. If energy comes on at a lower price, solar comes on at a lower price, or any offset, any lower price driven by technology has to be offset by more money printing to keep the system in check.
Right, right. But just let me ask you there, but so help educate us more here, because we see all the news, the articles that come out of how much of a carbon footprint Bitcoin mining is leaving. So is that not accurate information?
It's not accurate information. It's the thing that holds governments in check. Government gets smaller, free market works, and it allows the abundance gained from technology to be able to broadly be distributed. Every other path, everyone that doesn't do that, that doesn't allow deflation to happen, essentially concentrates wealth and power, and along that axis at some point, essentially you have complete government state-run control.
Okay. And on the topic of, can my Bitcoin be taken? We saw what happened with the pipeline fiasco. What's your response there, Jeff?
So it cannot be taken unless somebody can take your memory. I sometimes wonder, if I were running a speculative attack on Bitcoin, I try to think about what might I do to change the narrative, and would I run a black ops operation to shut down a power grid or multiple power grids in the US as a Bitcoin ransom to be able to change the narrative from Bitcoin. I'm not saying necessarily that happened, but you must at least question why we haven't seen any. If it was so easy to get this Bitcoin and on this attack, why isn't somebody in jail today? If it was so easy to find, why haven't we seen that part of the news? So, but again, if unless somebody could take your memory, your Bitcoin is safe as if you hold it yourself. You are your own bank.
Jeff, what do you make of when you hear some pretty bold forecasts when it comes to the crypto of, you know, 1 million within 5 years, 250,000 by this year? Uh, do you, you know, which kind of camp do you subscribe to here?
I try to stay out of the short-term price noise because it's a bigger thing than me. I do think it's going much higher, and I think it's going to be upwardly volatile the entire way. So I would subscribe that it just let's walk through this. And in technology that technology today requires a currency that allows for deflation. The only one that seems to do that cannot be manipulated is Bitcoin. If Bitcoin and where we are on Bitcoin today, it's like investing in the protocol layer of the internet. And a bunch of the other innovation that's being put on top of it is a network effect, and it's creating more and more value, and more people are starting to see this. I would add that what's happening is this. Probably 30 years ago, you would have had 1% disinflation, and governments lowered interest rates to try to stop it. And then it kept on going. So you had a compound, and maybe 2% 5 years ago, and maybe now disinflation is somewhere around 4%, the natural world, what would look like. And so, but we're used to measuring off zero. So the inflationary, what's happening is that theft is actually way bigger than you think. But more than that is if you have that corruption in the base layer, and what's happening is more and more people, the more and more you deceive the market, the more people are starting to understand what Bitcoin really is and how it changes that. And so these systems are polar opposite. Right? So the existing system that's driving to inflation must continue. And I wrote in the book that if you think $185 trillion is a lot over the last 20 years, wait till you see what's coming on the existing system, because mathematically it has to keep going. And think about some of the byproducts or some of so what would you do as a business? What do I do as a business in that environment? I try to remove labor faster with technology, because if I don't, then my business will fail because other businesses will use technology to drive labor away faster. So that's actually what's happening. So the faster that one system pushes back against the other, it's speeding up and speeding up and speeding up. And that's why you saw 500 billion being a lot in 2008 and marches on Wall Street, and now nobody blinks at 5 trillion, is for the same reason.
Jeff, do you like any of the other cryptos, Ethereum, for example?
I don't, because there's a whole bunch of reasons. Well, no, the number one reason is there is not another one that I believe could be
Not manipulated.
manipulated as a and so, in other words, there was not another one that could be kind of a reserve currency of the world, in my belief. I do understand why people would want others to be, because they could be manipulated. I actually I had this debate with somebody privately on Twitter, somebody that you would know, but I won't say, that was talking about altcoins and actually said, but then we could create the new rules. And that's the point. And to me, that's the point. It's totally hypocritical. You want to remove money. You want to remove human bias from money, so that the abundance gained from technology could be broadly shared, and we could live in a freer market.
You mentioned the reserve currency of the world. Is that a future that you think we're headed to, where Bitcoin will become the reserve currency of the world?
I think that it's inevitable. I think something like that is inevitable. It's going to be steps. Different countries are going to take different steps. There's going to be lots of fights against that, lots of ups and downs. But I think it's inevitable.
I guess, Jeff, my final question to you, we started off saying how you wrote the book really for your children. I don't know how old your children are, but what has been their reception to the book? Are you like the cool dad? Do they love Bitcoin?
Well, now
Are they like, just dad, just stop with your financial stuff already?
all of the above, all of the above. When Bitcoin people make memes about me, or crazy memes and everything else, my kids get a kick out of that. But I'm also the stop talking about Bitcoin already.
Well, when it comes to Bitcoin, you're part of the cool gang. When we think
Maybe.
of so you definitely have made it in the crypto world. Jeff, I really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us here on StansberryInvestor.com.
Thanks for having me.
Get the book, The Price of Tomorrow. It's a great one. And thank you all for watching. We'll have more great content coming your way. In the meantime, remember to share us where you watch us. And don't forget to sign up for my exclusive one-on-one interview with Vince Guzzo. He is a media magnate and the founder of Cinema Guzzo, along with many other companies. He's also the star of Canada's Dragon's Den. He joins me for an exclusive one-on-one interview you will not want to miss. You can register to watch it at DanielaCambone.com. Register for free today.